I'm working with FES since a very long time. I have one of those untypical working contracts that nowadays one doesn't get anymore. And have worked in different functions and positions, also abroad for FES. Was abroad 15 years in different stations. We have like 100 offices in different countries. And right now the position I'm holding is coordinator of trade union programs of FES in Europe, North America and Japan, where we have in total about 34 or so offices, all of which run trade union programs and issues that are related to trade union issues, so social development, labor market development, and so on. In the context of this, we had decided in 2012 to run an internationally coordinated program on youth unemployment. I brought a few of those reports. Of course, the data is outdated by now, but just to give you an idea, in case anybody's interested, I leave it here. Where we had the kickoff was a study done by a German institute, just tell the story about youth unemployment in Europe as a whole. And then we had a total of 12 or 13 country reports, country studies of different quality following. I can tell you a little bit on that basis, and of course we followed the discussion that I mean, basically the debate on youth unemployment has become much bigger, and the concern about youth unemployment has become much bigger now during the last couple of years than we had expected in 2011 and 12 when we were setting up this research project there. We considered a first very important and step in the right direction that the EU then decided on the youth guarantee, on the European Youth Guarantee, which was a demand basically from the political camp that's close to us. But one must also admit that the European Youth Guarantee doesn't seem to work. It doesn't, or at least doesn't seem to make much of a difference. And we can also talk about that. Why is that so? Now, I have been told that you want to do this in an interview kind of fashion. Now Florian said I'm supposed to give you a short introduction. Maybe I say very few brief things and then we get into dialogue and we see where it takes us. Am I understandable? Yeah? Okay. We believe that what we see in Europe right now as policies with regard to crisis management, economic and financial fiscal recovery is to a large extent now going the wrong way. We believe that the understanding as to what kind of crisis is it that we are dealing with is the wrong understanding. The predominant one now is the one on austerity. The predominant view is we have a problem with public households, with public debts, and this is why we need austerity programs, and only through austerity economic recovery, and after or with economic recovery, labor market, and then of course also youth unemployment can be taken care of or can be tackled. That's a predominant view, and we believe this view is wrong. We believe that I mean, one could now talk a lot about the crisis and the reasons of the crisis and so on. I'm not going there, but as far as as far as austerity is concerned, we believe it's clear now that those measures make things worse, make the economic crisis worse. Yes, in some countries need fiscal stabilization, but the way that the way it's done has more negative effects than expected. At least more negative effects than one can possibly wish for. Coming to youth unemployment, one must admit that in each and every country, youth unemployment needs to be looked at separately because the situation is different. Like in Greece, for example, one dominant view nowadays is, these young people, they are not qualified enough and they are not motivated enough. Now, so one needs to qualify them and one needs to push them a little bit that they are more flexible and these kind of things. We believe this can't quite be the reality because, for instance, Greece, one of the worst cases with regard to youth unemployment, they had embarked on a large-scale program of training of young people before the crisis hit. Never before, in Europe in general, never before we had a young generation that was as qualified as this young generation, your generation, now is. So, yes, maybe in individual case, one can always learn more and be better, but in general, we have a generation that is more qualified than any other generation before. Or if I'm looking at the amount of young people who are now searching for jobs outside of their hometowns or even outside of their home countries, it proves to me that there is enough motivation there, so that those conservative politicians who say one just needs to push them a little bit more, they're obviously wrong, because it is not a matter as such of qualification or of motivation. What we can see is that in Italy, for instance, the situation is different to the one in Greece or Spain, Germany certainly. In Italy, we have an extreme problem with the school-to-work transition. Nowhere else does it take so long for a young person to find a job, even before the crisis, to find a job after university or after vocational training. It takes years. Before the crisis, it took years before somebody finds a proper job. There's obviously something wrong in the system, in the educational and vocational training system, because the matching of qualifications on the one side and of the labor market needs on the other side works worse in Italy, it seems, than in most, if not any other country. And we have a totally different set of problems, like in Ireland or Spain, where just over the boom years, the creation of jobs that we have seen was the creation of jobs primarily in low qualified sectors, particular construction. And then came the crisis, and the sector that was hit most was the construction sector. So, of course, that led to lots of people losing their jobs in construction sectors. I was in Ireland 3 weeks ago, and they told us that within 3 years, I think it was, the number of workers in the construction sector went down from 210,000 to 93,000, so less than half, and similar rates or even worse, I think, in Spain. Obviously, this is a totally different situation. So, in Germany is a totally different story, and don't believe anybody who says that it all has to do with our wise policy and our excellent system of vocational training, dual system, and so on. Yes, it has to do, but those are probably not the reasons. We were just lucky. We were lucky that the industrial products that we are producing are in high demand in the world market right now. We were lucky that the decline of demand for our products in your countries was offset, more than offset, by a higher demand, by an increasing demand in Asia and Latin America, in particular Asia. So we were lucky there. There were also some elements where I believe one can learn from. Yes, our vocational training system is maybe better than many others. But we here, Ruud can talk about this in the other room, and we'll probably talk about it right now. We here actually think that our vocational training system is in a crisis. It just fares better than those of many other European countries right now. But looking at it from our point of view, we particularly see that there is a crisis, and it is praised now for things of the past, not so much for things of current. Certainly one of the big advantages that Germany had, and that has to do with industrial relations now, was that during this crisis, when in 2008, 2009, in some sectors, production dropped by 50% and more, that this time round the companies have not chosen to fire people where they could avoid it, but to keep people in order to be the first ones to be able to produce full scale again once the crisis is over, once the drop of demand is over. We had a workshop with people from Mercedes, and they had this trough or bathtub theory there. Said it goes down now, and they were hit terribly. I mean, Mercedes demand for trucks was down 60% or something in 2009. So it went down like this. And then they said, okay, and then comes a level like this, but then it will go up again, because it always goes up again. And we want to be the first ones to be ready when it goes up again. It worked out fabulously for them. But it was a managerial decision not to fire people in order to break even down here, but to rather keep people in order to be ready for here. And this was made easier for management by certain things. One is this is a legal provision, Kurzarbeitergeld. How do you pronounce? So companies can apply for subsidies basically in situations of crisis, where then the government pays. I don't know whether even not, a very high percentage of the wages for people affected, for workers affected. And this was very quickly, this mechanism was very quickly adapted, so that means extended. Usually you can only do that up to 6 months, and then they extended it so that it worked over the entire length of the low in demand. And we had, as it turned out, very smart collective agreements, and the trade unions also were very quick and cooperative in reaching new agreements, basically along the line, if you keep somebody in the company now, you can pay them less as long as you keep them, and then whatever is, it's a long-term deal. Or we have many CBAs, in particular in the export industries, where if you work overtime and so on, you can save this time basically in a special account, and then you can either get payment for it later, or you can get extra holidays, or you can retire earlier at the end of your working life in that company. And the trade unions had agreed then, in many cases they had agreed, okay, we use this account of hours. So you keep the person, you don't need to pay them what you were supposed to pay them. We shrink this hours saved, save the job this way. So there were mechanisms like these that helped Germany to get through the crisis, although it hit extremely hard, but keep the labor market to keep the labor market flexible, or actually one should probably say keep the labor market flexible. No? Even if demand drops, labor stays. This kind of flexibility, that's the winning recipe, so to say. So it was a mix. Don't believe every short-term or quick answer that some people give you, that it's all vocational training or something like this. So we have those differences, but I think that should be my last point now, before we start discussing. But we also, of course, see some similarities now in Europe if we look at youth unemployment, and one certainly is that there is a point, of course, in this qualification. What we see from findings is that, yes, without proper qualification, young people have less and less job opportunities on European labor markets. That is not so surprising. But what we also see is that good qualification is less and less of a guarantee for a proper job. No? So yes, it is important to invest in individually and as societies to invest in qualification and training and so on, but it is less and less of a guarantee for employment. Other factors have to come in. Then what we also see is, as a similarity, is that we have an increasing number of, in Spain they call them ninis, needs, neither in employment nor in education or training. And that is probably something that should even be of much higher concern for policymakers and for all of us than just the unemployment figures. Because if somebody is neither in education, employment, or training, that means these people stand an extremely high chance to be totally frustrated, totally demotivated, totally out of the system, so to say. And we know from our long-term unemployment research and statistics and so on, we know that, and also we all know some long-term unemployed, don't we? And it's noticeable that the longer you are out of the system, neither in education, nor in training, nor in employment, the harder it becomes to re-enter. The harder it becomes to believe in a personal future in the labor market. So I believe this 19% or what it is now of need is the one group that we need to be concerned about most and foremost, more than anybody else, because there's a big chance that this term of lost generation, it will definitely start from there. And the last similarity, and that's important from where I'm standing, that we see is it has to do with labor market policy. And it's a normal thing, and it has always been the case, that if there's a slack in demand or a crisis, those people who enter the company last will go first. And the old ones stay on. That's a normal tendency. You can't do anything about it, really. But the gap has never been that big. So to say, let's put it this way: a crisis always hits young workers harder than older workers, or because they are more recent employees. But no crisis in Europe has ever hit the younger workers as hard, as disproportionate as this one. That is what the statistics clearly show. And that, I believe, has a lot to do with this trend of flexibilization and deregulation in the labor market that we have seen in all our countries since a longer period of time, since before the crisis. Because it has become so much easier to lay off people. In other words, not to do what I've described before for the German case, where there were mechanisms in place to flexibilize the labor market against those shocks, and the deregulation of labor market, the flexibilization of rules for employment. I believe strongly, have led to the situation where this flexibility of the labor market, where this buffering has been reduced, has shrunk, so that drops in demand, crisis effects hit much harder on the labor market. And what we also know, and this is the last sentence, is that it is always easier to fire somebody than to rehire. It's always easier to lose jobs than to create jobs. Always easy. It's always much more difficult to create jobs. And if an industry is totally killed, then of course it has become even much more difficult. And I believe that also applies to some of the situations that we see in some European countries now, that industries maybe have no future anymore, companies at least have no future anymore.
So you said that you believe that the crisis management is going the wrong way with the austerity measures taken, and you said that the public opinion is that public debt is the problem, and you said that you think this view is wrong. So I was wondering what your recommendation would be on which road you would have taken or would take today if you had the choice to take that road, and how you would do you think that the policy will change or is changing? And yes.
Now, neither am I a macroeconomist, nor am I a Nobel Prize laureate. So I don't know what's the solution right now, in general terms, for this crisis and so on. What we know with hindsight is that it would have been much smarter not to to react earlier, that Eurobonds probably would have been a good idea to be introduced, or at least the Draghi guarantee of no euro country will go down. We get the bazooka out, whatever. This kind of guarantee a year or two earlier would probably have saved us billions and billions of euros, and probably would have saved lots of jobs. But it's always easy to say that with hindsight and so on. Right now, how they are going to deal with the fiscal consolidation, I don't know the answer, and luckily I don't have to know the answer because other people are much more in that field. But what is clear, what I believe is a building consensus in Europe, is that the effects of austerity policies as they have been introduced have been grossly underestimated. The effects this has in the real economy. It is harder and harder to find anybody now who says, no, Europe is not shrinking itself to death. Obviously, one needs to find a different balance, another balance for this problem, to somehow get rid of too much of public debt and private debt, which is in some cases more of a problem, it seems, on the one side, but not strangling the economies to that. What we see now is that if you overdo it here, the economic development goes down so much that even if in nominal terms your debt may be, your debt obligations may shrink, in relative terms they still rise. No? So you're cutting expenditures and so on, and all you are getting is that the GDP to debt ratio gets worse and worse. So that is, for instance, one mistake that is obvious now. It is also obvious. It seems to be obvious that, and that leads also to the second question somehow, that demand side effects or issues have been grossly underestimated. So what I would foresee is that we will definitely get some serious discussion in Europe under the new Commission also regarding investment programs, large-scale investment programs. Maybe large-scale investment programs with new forms of financing behind it, because we still have to meet all the countries still have to meet the maximum debt criteria of the EU and so on. So there's a lot of discussion going on now behind doors and sometimes in front of doors as to what other mechanisms can be found to finance public expenditure, or to finance expenditure into public investment. Can I build roads and bridges and waterways or whatever with other money than state money? That's the question right now. In order to create demand without running into the debt trap right away. So we are going. That's what I would predict, that we are going to see not only a large debate, but then also probably put in effect one way or the other investment programs, large-scale investment programs in Europe, because that seems to be pretty clear even to more and more conservative people, that demand has been strangled, and this starts killing the prospects for growth. I mean, where shall growth come from? And those who thought that it can be export-led growth, like, look at Germany, they do it, why can't we do it? Those are wrong. Germany is lucky with the kind of products we are having, but it's 200 years of industrial development behind it. You can't just decide to build Mercedes all of a sudden, or build factories in Saudi Arabia for the Saudis. No, that is not a matter of political or managerial decision as such, but these are things that have to grow slowly. And not everybody can export. I mean, somebody also has to buy. In Germany, again, we have the situation can be also described in supply and demand terms. We have to create more internal demand. We are going about it, yeah. Minimum wage is one of those things. The trade union demands now in the current rounds of collective agreement negotiations are comparatively high. So we have to create internal demand here.
Well, I thought I understood that you said that qualification is not just the key factor nowadays to foster employment or to find employment in Europe. So I would like to know, according to your opinion, what would be the other factors to take into consideration to find employment for young people in Europe also nowadays?
I have a cousin who studied engineering in Germany's top school for engineering. It was an extremely hard study, but he can choose the job. Once he's through, he can choose the job. This kind of situation you don't find in very many cases anymore. The usual situation is that people leave their training, leave university, and they cannot choose the job, but it's still a struggle. And the only thing that helps there is, again, the demand. We have to create jobs. We have to put a political priority on the creation of jobs. That has to become more important than anything else. That demand for young people's workforce is just going to happen. Seems to be a dream. One has to do a little bit more than just dream. That is what we believe, and that seems to be a view and an analysis that at least wins more and more support within political circles in Europe. Early retirement. I would like it. Unfortunately, the trend in politics goes the other way, because we have another huge problem that hasn't been solved yet, and that is increasing, also increasing with the crisis, and that is that we don't know how to pay our retirement benefits and our pensions anymore. So everywhere, and in Germany as well, we have a situation where people are saying, okay, there's demographic change. People are getting older and older. Less and less active workers have to pay for pensions of more and more pensioners. There's an imbalance, and one way to deal with this is to send people to retirement a little bit later, and to have others enter the labor market a little bit earlier was also actually a trend these days. Nobody is talking about that so much anymore, but this is another discourse and another concern and serious problem that we're having. I'm still interested in finding figures on that, but my impression is that some of the pension systems, I'm working a bit with Eastern European countries, and I believe some of the pension systems in Eastern Europe are basically bankrupt already. So that's another serious problem.
As a solution, could it be possible that people who is 67 retired before like 60 and young people occupied that place?
These kind of things. Obviously they are doing something right there. Now, if you're looking at the job machine Germany right now, is that what one has to see is that the number of hours worked in Germany has not changed. More people work less hours. That's what we are doing. There are much more flexible arrangements. Some are forced on the employees. They would love to work more. They would love to be paid more also. Some also have to do with change of individual preferences as well. No? So not all of it is forced down. Some of it is actually also wanted by individuals. What I want to say is, it's not only a zero-sum. Sometimes it's a zero-sum game because, like, the amount of work that is needed in an economy may not rise as quickly as one would wish it to. But even if the amount is stable, one can distribute the work differently. And that is certainly a lesson from Germany that we are seeing right now. And we are not always happy with it, but one just needs to put it down as a fact. The number of hours worked has not changed. But we have far more people in jobs now than before. And the reason of what it means is that we have far more people than ever before in part-time contracts, in temporary contracts, and all this kind of what we in other situations and in other discussion rounds then call precarious work, and we are extremely concerned about precariousness.